Hello viewers and readers and scholars of literature, welcome back to the second part of this story Dharma by Vikram Chandra. So here we in the previous lecture we discussed at length the summary of the short story, and now I will be going on to the various themes that are the various important themes that are there in this particular short story. As you can see on the screen, there are three basic ideas or the themes on which the discussion will move forward. So, I will be discussing at length in the second part of the lecture on firstly the past trauma and the memories, secondly Dharma as a horror story, and third is the title, the description of the title, the significance of the title, and what is Dharma here, whose Dharma. So, this is how I will go about in the second part of the lecture. Now, let us first discuss on the past trauma and the memories. So, undoubtedly one of the key themes in the story is about the past, about memories, about trauma and pain. The story Dharma shows how pain and past trauma keeps recurring and visits Jahangir or Jago in his life. First instance of the past and the pain and the trauma is Jago's missing leg, as we know that because Jago right at the beginning of the story is reminded of his leg. As you can see on the screen now, look at these lines with which the story begins. On the day that Major General Jago Antia turned 50, his missing leg began to ache. So this is how the very first instance of the past comes in the life of Jahangir Antia. This pain in the leg which is not there is a potent metaphor, is a very significant metaphor for the past pain and the trauma that Jago is going through. This leg, as we know by now in the summary in the previous lecture, was lost during the Indo-Pak War of 1971. We know that Jago himself cut his destroyed and bombed leg off as there was no time left to operate it. Jahangir now is feeling the pain in the leg which is already missing from there. Hence the pain of the past comes to him right from the moment the story begins, from the very first line of the story itself which we just now discussed. But the important thing to ponder over is, if the pain is only physical. Is the pain only physical? Perhaps not. The pain is more psychological than physical. This is all because of memory and how memory keeps coming back. Just like if you remember we discussed Swimming Lessons by Rohinton Mistry, this story is also about the memory and about the past, about the trauma. However, as we saw in the lecture on Swimming Lessons, the past was not very painful. However, the past is really painful for Jahangir. And is the pain physical? No, the pain lies in the heart of Jago. There is an unresolved psychological pain that he is going through which is worse than the pain of his limb. All his visitations into the past make him realize that it is in his own past which comes in the form of a ghost to haunt him in the present. The story is in fact a thriller horror story of an army veteran which brings back the pain of childhood trauma and memories. Deep down, Jago still blames himself for the death of Soli. Perhaps the final reconciliation and the final encounter with his own ghost, the viewers know by now from the very first lecture that it is his own ghost. So the final reconciliation that he has with his own ghost now finally puts him at ease and he is able to reconcile with the past. The ghost that he finds upstairs is not of Soli, but it is of Jago himself. So perhaps his own memories are now taking up a ghostly face. His own memories, his past, the trauma that he has gone through has taken up the face of a ghost. Interestingly, when Jago goes to meet the ghost upstairs, he is constantly reminded of his past, of the way he used to play with his brother, his family members, the little everyday tussles of his life, the little joys of his life, and how he used to fly kite, how he used to have fun with his uncle whose name was Burjor Mama, and how he used to take him on long rides to the beaches, and how he also faced the painful death of his brother Soli. So he is constantly, as we know, he is constantly reminded of his past. and of the good things about the past, and obviously about the bad things about his past. So the past keeps coming back to Jago at the most crucial and critical moments in his life. And interestingly, the readers, when they read the story, they would see that during his visit to the ghost, when finally he is going to confront the ghost, when he is going upstairs, as per the directions of the exorcist, as you know, he was made to go upstairs naked, and he was asked to confront the ghost and face the ghost and to seek an answer about what the ghost is actually looking for. So when he is going to the ghost, when Jago visits on the very first floor, when he goes to that room, when he tries to face that ghost, all his past, all the painful things about his past, all the beautiful things about his past, about his family, about his mother, about his brother, about his uncle, and about all the joys of childhood, and about all the pains that he has, all the past keeps coming back to him at that critical and at that exact crucial moment. So basically, Dharma, the story, is a psychological thriller, and the past, the memories, the past and all the memories that Jago has takes up, I would say, a ghostly face in front of him. It is his own ghost, his own past. The pain leads him to his home, the home leads him to his past, the past leads him to the ghost, and the ghost finally leads him to what? To peace and reconciliation and acceptance. And as soon as this reconciliation happens, the pain that he has in him, the phantom pain that he has in his leg, it all goes away. As soon as the final reconciliation with the ghost happens, the phantom pain goes away and Jago becomes absolutely at ease with himself. He becomes very comfortable in his own skin, and the story ends there. So what can we can say that there is some guilt in Jago. There is some pain, some trauma that is still there which is unresolved. There is a guilt in Jago. But after the confrontation with his own ghost, he has accepted himself. After the confrontation with his own ghost, he is now willing to transform himself. So Jago is now accepting himself, and what? He has also accepted the past. He has also accepted the death of his own brother. So that guilt has been resolved now. That unresolved conflict has finally been resolved now. So therefore I would say Dharma is a horror story, but it is more about psychological horror, isn't it? Rather than real horror or supernatural horror. As we know, there was no such ghost in that house. It was the own, you can say, the projected memory. It was the own projected memory of Jahangir Antia. So on this exact note, let us now delve more into the idea of Dharma as a horror story. But it is a horror story, for sure it is, but it is an unconventional horror story, and I would say it's a story with a difference. So here we go on to the second part of the lecture, to the second theme, I would say, not the second part, the second theme of the lecture, and that was Dharma as a horror story, Dharma as a ghost story. So before we get on to the detailed critical analysis of Dharma as a horror story, let us first take a moment here and appreciate the skillful manner in which Vikram Chandra narrates the scenes of horror. So as we know, Vikram Chandra is a very artful, very skillful writer, very dexterous in the way that he lends there is a superiority in his prose, in the way that he constructs his plot. So let us first, I would say, we should first take a moment to appreciate the skillful manner and look at the scenes now which describe the scenes of horror that Jahangir Antia goes through. And for that, what I will be doing is, I will be reading the lines where the author shows Jago's confrontation with the ghost, and then we will try to understand the way in which Vikram Chandra builds up the tensions in the reader. He builds up this curiosity, this suspense, this tension in the reader, and this is a narrative technique which is very crucial for a thriller of this sort. If you read any thriller for that matter, so a tension, a palpable tension is built up in the reader. of the story. So, this unique narrative technique is something which is a part of the armory of Vikram Chandra. So, look at the following lines. I'll be reading the lines very slowly, which describe the first experience of Jago with the ghost that he experiences when he visits his home for the very first time. And I am quoting the screen. He was able to move up the staircase, but on the landing, a breath of air curled around his ankle like a flow of cool liquid, and he began to shiver. Then he bit down, but despite his training, he could hardly take a step before he stopped again. His eyes, and I am quoting again, his eyes filled with moisture, and suddenly the dark was full of soft shadows. Again he heard the voice, far away, melancholy and low. With a groan, he collapsed against the banister and slid down the stairs all the way to the bottom, his leg rattling on the steps. And once he made it to the middle of the landing, but the fear took the strength from his hips so that he had to crawl on hands and knees to the descent. At dawn, he sat shaken and weak on the first step, his arm around the comforting curve of the thick round post. Unquote. So, you see, this was the very first encounter with the supernatural power that Jahangir faced. This was his very first encounter. And look at the second instance. Now, I will be quoting the second instance, the second time that Jahangir meets his ghost. As you can see on the screen, this is the second instance that Jahangir meets his ghost. The night came on and passed. He thought finally that nothing would happen, and there was a grey outside the window. But then he heard again the incessant calling. He could tell from moment to moment where it was on the balcony. It was not a trick of the wind, not a hallucination. It came closer, and now Jago Antia was able to hear what it was saying. Where shall I go? The question was asked with a sob in it, like a tearing hiccup, so close that Jago Antia heard it shake the small frame that asked it. He felt a sound in his own throat, a moan, something like pain, sympathy. Then he felt the thing pause, and though there was nothing but the air, he felt it coming at him, first hesitating, then faster, asking again, where shall I go, where, and he backed away from it fast, tripping over his heels, and he felt the railing on the balcony of his thighs, hard, and then he was falling. Unquote. So, if you look at these lines, Antia falls down the stairs here, and more importantly, you notice the way in which Vik Chandra narrates these supernatural events and the scenes with a certain suspense and a spooky thrill. Now, this was the second instance. Now, once again, I will be quoting the third instance, the final most instance, when he sees the ghosts after he has been asked to walk up to him naked by the exorcist. And I am quoting again. As Jago Antia walked slowly up the stairs, unbuttoning his shirt, his pulse was rushing in his head, each beat like an explosion, not out of fear anymore, but from the kind of anticipation, because now he knew who it was, he knew who the ghost was, who waited for him. Jago Antia's forehead trembled against the glass, and now he turned and walked down the corridor. As he walked, he felt that it was walking beside him, in front of him, around him. He held himself up and said, "Are you still here? Tell me what you want." Then he saw at the parapet, very dim and shifting in the grey light, the shape of a small body, a boy looking down over the edge towards the scene. As Jago Antia watched, the boy turned slowly, and in the weak light he saw the boy was wearing a uniform of olive green, and he asked, "Where shall I go?" So Jago Antia looked at the boy as he came closer, and he saw the small letters above the pocket, J. Antia. And the sun came up, and he saw the boy clearly. He saw the enormous dark eyes, and in the eyes he saw his vicious and ravenous strength, his courage and his devotion, his silence and his pain, his whole misshapen and magnificent life. And Jago Antia said, "Jahangir, Jahangir, you are already at home." Unquote. So there are moments of excitement, there are moments of thrill, there are moments of stress, there are moments of riveting suspense in this narrative. So that is why I have quoted all these lines here, to show you the moments of excitement, the moments of stress, the moments of suspense, right? So, this long passage that we just read now is a clear proof of that. And as I have mentioned repeatedly, Chandra is an exceptionally skillful writer. He is an exceptionally skillful writer, I would say, who presents such heart-pounding scenes, such unexpected twists and the tensions which adds to the overall spooky nature and the eerie atmosphere of these lines. How is he evoking this horror? The horror is evoked through, I would say, sensory moments and descriptions, sensory descriptions to add to the overall gothic feel, to the overall spooky feel, I would say, to the eerie atmosphere of the story. And such moments, as I have said, it is not shown repeatedly, it is not shown explicitly. For example, the face of the ghost and the figure of the ghost in the very first instance, if you take a look back in the very first instance, it is not shown in a proper explicit manner. The face of the ghost, the figure of the ghost is not shown in an explicit manner. Rather, as I said, horror is evoked through sensory descriptions, through descriptions of the senses and through sensory descriptions and semi-graphic details. And why is Vikram Chandra doing that? As skillful a writer that he is, he does that to build the tension of the horror story, to build the tension in the horror story in the readers. So, it is indeed a very artful manner in which Vik Chandra describes the situations. In the scenes where Thakkar comes and informs him about the ghost of a child, the readers are led on to believe that it is the ghost of Sohrab. It is the ghost of Soli. Sohrab, Soli is the nickname of Sohrab, just like Jago is the nickname of Jahangir. So, the readers towards the end, even right towards the end of the story, the readers are led on to believe that the ghost is of Sohrab, the ghost is of Soli, the younger brother of Jago, who died a very painful, tragic, accidental death while flying a kite and falling from the roof. Till this point, and this description of Sohrab's death is right before the end of the story. So, even when the story is more than halfway through, when the story is almost coming to an end, till this point the readers believe that it is the ghost of Soli, it is the ghost of a child, and Soli died as a young kid, as a young boy. But it is only later at the end that we see, when we see the badge of Jago, when we see the badge of Jahangir Antia. So, on the badge of Jahangir Antia is written J. Antia. And it is here that we realize that the ghost which is coming towards Jahangir Antia, which is coming towards Jago, and the ghost on whose badge is written J. Antia, and the ghost who is wearing a green olive army uniform, that ghost is the ghost of Jago himself. Or you can say that it's a hallucination kind of a stuff, or you know, it's a projected memory. You can call it a projected memory of Jago himself. Now, this story Dharma, as I mentioned, is a horror story, but it is a horror story with a twist. The ghost that Jago sees is his own. It's the ghost of his own childhood. This clearly means that the ghost that Jahangir sees is of his own pain. It's of his own trauma. If it's basically of his own trauma of the death of his elder brother Sohrab. The pain that he had in him comes in the form of a ghost. It takes up a ghostly face in front of him. And this final confrontation that he has lends a new meaning to his life, isn't it? Because you will notice that after this confrontation, Jahangir is very much at ease with himself. Also, you will notice that throughout the supernatural incidents that he goes throughout the supernatural incidents that, you know, when he is on the first floor and when he is facing these supernatural incidents, he keeps remembering his childhood and the incidents of his childhood. This is because that is where the ghost of his life actually is. The ghost of his life resides in the past. It is in his heart. There is no real ghost over here. However, there is no such thing called a real and a ghost, but still there is no supernatural event that is happening over there. So, it is only a psychological ghost. It is not a ghost in the true sense of the word, it is basically a psychological ghost, a painful trauma, the projected memory of Jahangir Antia. And you would also realize that both Thapa and both Amir Khan, both who live there, who are around there, are not able to see the ghost themselves. They are not able to feel the presence of the ghost there. Amir Khan has been living in that house for quite some time, but Amir has never had any experiences of the ghost. No one has felt about or seen any supernatural ghost there. This fact clearly proves that it is not a supernatural ghost, but it is a psychological ghost only. So this ghost was basically Jago's own subconsciousness, his own subconsciousness, his own subconscious self, and the ghost gives him a closure in that sense, as now he is able to face his own ghosts. So now the ghost confrontation with the ghost allows him to face his own self, and it gives him that closure, that gives him comfort from both his pain in his phantom leg as well as mentally. If you go right at the very beginning of the story, in the very first initial 1 to 2 pages, in the very first initial pages, look at what Subramaniam says, and these are very significant lines. I knew a man once who met a ghost. Some people meet their ghosts and some don't, but we are all haunted by them. So these lines, if you remember in the very first part of the lecture, I quoted these lines and I also mentioned that these lines are very significant. These lines right at the beginning of the story clearly and unequivocally suggest that the horror story might be psychological than supernatural. If you look at this quote again, Subramaniam basically says that some people meet their ghosts, while some people do not meet their ghosts. He says that some people are able to come to terms with their ghosts, but there are some people who are not able to come to terms with their ghosts. Some are able to face it, some are not, and some don't even realize the pain, the ghosts that they are facing, the pain that they are going through. So such is the symbolic significance of the short story. So here the ghost represent a person's own inner conflicts, and it also represents the pains of a person. So the ghost represents a person's own inner conflicts and the pains. The ghost represents the past trauma and the unresolved psychological conflicts, the unresolved pain, the memories, the tragedy, and you can say the trauma of one's past. So this suggests here that the story is more psychological rather than supernatural. And these lines that I just quoted a while ago by Subramaniam show exactly that, isn't it? Right. So also we notice that, and I've mentioned it before, that this is the horror story, but it's a horror story with a twist. There is no real ghost here, but it is the protagonist's own ghost that he sees. Also the horror story, if you notice, the horror story ends with a reconciliation. The horror story ends with a sort of a, you can say it's a sort of a happy ending, right? So that is why Dharma is considered as a horror story, but it can be a horror story with a difference. The ghost here acts as an agent of positive transformation. Antya becomes better by meeting his own ghost. He is now reconciled with his past and is finally smiling and laughing at the end of the story. He is having a cup of tea with his servant, with Amir Khan and with Thapa, and he is enjoying the moment. So it is not tragedy, but rather a good change that this ghost brings out in Jago's character, very significant. So finally the ending is kind of a happy ending. In a horror story, you know that there is no such happy ending, but we see in most of the horror stories there is no such happy ending, but here there is a happy ending. There is a reconciliation. There is no death here. There are no tragedies in this story. The ghost acts rather as an agent of positive transformation for Jahangir Antya. There is no negativity in the story due to the ghost, but rather the ghost acts as an agent of positive transformation. This is because there is no ghost at all, but rather it is his own psychological trauma with which he finally reconciles himself. So this is how we can interpret Dharma as a horror story. It is a horror story, for sure it is. It's a thriller, psychological thriller, but it is unconventional too. And we just now discussed the various features by which this story is a horror story, but with a difference. Now let us go on to the last topic, and here I will briefly discuss the significance of the title Dharma, the significance of the title Dharma. Okay. So what do we mean by Dharma here, the title? What does Dharma mean here? Dharma basically means duty. It means righteousness, doing what is right. It was Jago's Dharma, or his duty, to go back to the past and fight his own ghost. It is not the ghost of his own younger brother. It is in fact the ghost, it is in fact his own projected memory, his own ghost. The story is about acceptance. The story is about accepting the past. It was his dharma, I would say, to get face to face with it again. Jago faces his ghost. It is his dharma, or his duty. That's what a dharma actually means, one's duty. So it is his own duty towards his own self to go up and face his own ghost, to face the unresolved psychological pain. So the story is also about finding our own selves, finding our own ghosts, and reconciling with the past, reconciling with the trauma, reconciling with the pain that we might have gone through. So the story is about finding our own selves, and in finding so, it can be very painful, but we have to face our fears and our ghosts. The story is about, basically it's about some righteous thing that he did not do, and it is his dharma to do it. The title therefore is about duty of the individual. The title therefore is about his own self. The title therefore is about his own dharma, to go back to his past and witness the horror and witness the ghost that he has gone through, the ghost of his own childhood, the pain that he has once gone through. And only then he will be able to accept his life and live normally. So you see, it's basically his dharma, because there is this unresolved conflict. There is this unresolved conflict in Jahangir Antia, and till now, so many years have gone by. Jahangir is more than 50 years old now, and the incident of the death of Sohrab happened in childhood, perhaps when he was a young kid of perhaps 10 years old maybe. He was a young kid, and even after so many decades, after more than 30-40 odd years, Jahangir has never been able to come to terms with his own ghost, with the own pain that he had. So he had to do the righteous thing. It was his dharma to go and face his own past, to go and face his own trauma. So it was his dharma, his duty, to go and face his own ghost. So the title therefore, dharma, because we are discussing right now about the title therefore, dharma, is about the duty of the individual, about his own self. It is his dharma to go back to his past and witness the horror and witness the ghost, and only then he will be able to accept his life and live normally. So here, let us now very quickly, what I will be doing is, I will be very quickly summarizing whatever we have discussed till now, and I will be very briefly touching upon some of the important points that we discussed in this two-part lecture. So we first discussed about the author and about the author's background, the author's immediate background, along with a discussion on the immediate context of the story Dharma. We discussed at length, then we discussed at length the entire summary of the short story, delving onto the various important junctures in the story for a quick understanding of this complex story. The story is definitely complex, but we discussed at length, we discussed in a very detailed manner the entire summary, which keeps going back and forth, the entire summary of the short story. Then we also discussed some major themes, some concurrent ideas that run throughout the story. In total, we discussed three themes here, and then we had also we have had fruitful discussions on the theme of past trauma. These three themes were the past trauma, the idea of the story Dharma as a horror story, as a psychological story, and lastly on the title Dharma itself. So these were the three themes that we discussed in this two-part lecture. So here we conclude our lecture on Vikram Chandra's short story Dharma. I hope this two-part lecture opened new avenues of discussions for the viewers and the readers. I also hope that the lecture gave some clarity on the story and on the various themes that I have discussed here. Hope to see you in such and in many more such lectures on some other day, on some other topic in the near future. Till then, keep learning and keep watching CEC-UGC. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. Thank you.